To represent integers verbally or using words. A few things that we need to recall first before we start to describe these integers is the fact that a plus sign out in front of a number means positive. Now sometimes you're not going to see that plus sign out in front of the number, but that number is still understood to be a positive number. And then also the negative sign or the minus sign as you have known it in earlier years. This sign is now going to be read as either the opposite of the number beside it or negative, whatever that number is. So we could use two words to describe that minus sign. It's either going to be the opposite of or negative. So how would I verbally describe the following integers? The first number I don't have a sign out in front of it. Now, if you recall what I said about the positive sign, it's not always going to be there, especially whenever it's the first number in a line of numbers. You don't have to write the positive sign because it's already understood to be a positive number. So this number right here, I would verbally describe as being a positive 5. The next number does have a sign out in front of it. This sign is a negative sign or an opposite sign. So for this whole number, I would describe it as either being the opposite of 5 or negative 5. The next number I have in my list is a 3. I would verbally describe this as saying the opposite of a positive 3 or negative 3. So when I'm describing these two numbers as two different statements, these two different statements actually mean the same thing. So the opposite of a positive 5 is in fact a negative 5. It's the very same thing. So whenever I get down to the next number, the final number of how we're going to represent it verbally, it gets a little tricky, but hopefully if you were listening closely to my description of the negative numbers, it should come a little easier. This number has two negative signs out in front. So I would describe this using my words of opposite and also negative. So I'm going to use a combination of the two words to describe this number. Usually you're going to see this type of a number with parentheses around the negative 4 here like this. The first negative sign I would read as being the opposite. So that's how I would describe or verbally say the first negative sign. And then the second negative sign, I'm just going to go ahead and use the word negative. So how I could verbally describe this number all together is the opposite of negative 4. So if I were looking at negative 4 by itself, it would look like this. I don't want negative 4 though, I want the opposite of negative 4. And the opposite of a negative 4 is in fact a positive 4. So what this statement really means is this? I'll show this on a number line in case you are confused about the opposite of the negative being a positive. Here's my number line starting at the origin of 0. So if I were looking at plotting a -4, I would put it over here. But my verbal description and my number is not asking for just a -4, it's looking at the opposite of a -4. And if you're looking at the opposite of a number, it's however many steps there are away from 0 to get to that number on the opposite side. So it takes 4 steps to get to a -4 from 0 to get to this -4. I want the opposite of the -4. It's going to be going 4 steps to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right here. So this would be the opposite of that point over here on the other side of 0. You can kind of think of 0 as your reflection or your mirror point. So the opposite of a -4 is in fact a +4. If you have any questions about verbally representing integers, you can stop by a morning tutoring session with either Ms. Schiebel or myself and ask some questions.